Deary me, deary me. Yes, as you can probably tell by the uninspiring, the downbeat opening to this podcast. This is a exclusively F1 / Motorsport episode of the podcast. I've decided I will split up Formula 1 Motorsport podcasts from regular car podcasts, because I know a lot of people don't give a shit about Formula 1, which might be an increasing number of people after what happened this weekend in the opening round of the 2024 season. Talk about a uninspiring, mood zapping opening round to the 2024 season. I suppose none of us really should be surprised with the result, but the lack of really any interest racing wise outside of the dominant winner was pretty lackluster. So if you're not aware, well, it's Sunday afternoon and I'm walking around in a park recording this. So if you hear any interesting background noise, that's why, because I'm in a park on this. It's a very dull Sunday, very cold Sunday afternoon in Dublin. But the race was on Saturday. I think the first 3 races are on Saturday this year, because we're in the Middle East and something to do with Ramadan, something. So yeah, opening round 2024 in Bahrain yesterday afternoon. We go into every new season with an element of hope, of a changing of the guard, unpredictability, some excitement, and qualifying. Again, well, Max up until Q3, it was kind of it could be Charles, could maybe be one of the Mercedes, and could challenge for pole. But then in Q3, when it really mattered, Max pulled it out of the bag and got pole by, I think, 0.3 of a second, give or take, ahead of Charles Leclerc. Then George Russell was 3rd, and Carlos Sainz 4th. Then I think 5th was it one of the Mercedes? Anyway, qualifying was fine. It gave us, again, an element of hope. But then the race happened on Sunday, and lights out and away they go, as Crofty would say. Max covered off Charles at the start, and after that it was an absolute walk in the park. So I'll run through. This won't be a massively long podcast, it being exclusively just about one dull F1 race. I will touch on the WEC as well, but so we'll go in reverse order. Say the best or the worst to last, if that makes any sense. So how it played out, last, somewhat unsurprisingly, but a little unfairly, in 20th position. There was no retirements in the race, which is a testament to the reliability, but also when every car finishes, it really adds to the unpredictability, or the lack of unpredictability, of a race, too. So both a good and a bad thing. But anyway, all 20 cars finished, and in 20th and last place was Logan Sargent. He was over a lap down, which, to be fair to him, not his fault in any way. He probably would have finished slightly higher up. He had an issue pretty early on, something wrong with his steering. He locked up going into the first corner, went off into the runoff area. He was stationary for quite a while. Sorry, I'm doing burping. I only use 8 again, as I always do with this podcast. So Jesus, I do apologise. So he was stationary for a while in the runoff area. He did eventually, after talking to his engineer and control alt delete and all sorts, he did get going again, but it's a lap down. So that was really his race run. He got to the checker flag, but he was out at the back very much by himself. So a sad day for poor Logan, who had a difficult season last year, but is being given a second chance. So we won't write him off just yet. Just a bad weekend for Logan in the Williams. 19th was Bottas. Again, poor El Bottas is finishing down 19th, really due to no fault of his own. He qualified, I think it was 14th or 15th, and had a pretty good start. I think he jumped about 3 or 4 places at the start, but then he kind of, he got squeezed in a bit of a first corner incident again, so he had nowhere to go. He sustained some front wing damage, which obviously then affected his handling throughout the race. And then when we came to his last pit stop, they couldn't get the left front wheel nut off or on, or one of them. Either way, the front left wheel nut was screwed. He was in the pits for, I think, a good minute. So his race was run before the pit stop, but then after the pit stop, it was game over for him. So again, he finished the race, but he finished 19th. And if it wasn't for there's a dog coming at me. Hell yeah! Very excited, little. I'm gonna say he's a labradoodle poodle. Very excited. Sorry for that that interruption. By a lovely little dog, just a little bit too yappy. Where was I over there? Bottas. Sorry, I've been completely thrown off by that dog. His race was run. He probably would have finished dead last if it wasn't for Logan Sargent's issues. But the driver with the worst luck in F1, getting plenty of bad luck yet again in this opening round in the Sauber kick, or whatever the hell it's called. 19th for Bottas. 18th was Pierre Gasly, which is, I thought Gasly finished ahead of Ocon. Maybe I've got that wrong. Either way, both the Alpines, both Gasly and Ocon finished 17th and 18th. I may be getting them mixed up in which order they were in, but I don't think it really makes much of a difference, because they started on the back row. So they locked out the back row in qualifying, and just a very innocuous race from the two Alpines. They're way off the pace. They're probably the slowest car. They probably would have finished dead last if it wasn't for Bottas and Sargent having their issues, because those are the only two cars that finished behind them, which is a dismal performance from what is a works manufacturer Formula 1 team. But there you go. It's just reiterates, I don't understand what Renault's motivation is with the Formula 1 team badged as Alpine. They just don't seem to want to invest, and seem to be relatively happy just running around at the back, which seems farcical to me. I don't know. It's like, it's not like they're starting bad, but they have something up their sleeve and they're going to take a jump like McLaren did last year. Dismal performance from the French F1 team, with their two French drivers, who are, I wouldn't necessarily say they're the cream of the crop of the grid, but they're certainly better than what the car they've been given is allowing them to achieve. So a dismal performance from the Alpines. 16th was Nico Hülkenberg, again unlucky. He got tagged at the start after having a great qualifying. He made it to Q3, qualified 10th, and was started pretty well, but then he got tagged at the start. Or was it he ran into, who did he spin around? Who did he tag? Who was involved in that? Stroll. So he tagged Stroll going into the first corner. Stroll had a good start. It was a racing incident. It was squeezed out into the first corner. No one's fault. It's just one of those things. You can't get three cars into one place in the road. So he tagged Stroll, which gave him front wing damage, which meant he had to come in, change his front wing after the first lap, and then he was just nursing an issue then for the rest of the race. The Haas does appear to be slightly improved from last season, so that is promising at least. Didn't chew up his tyres quite as aggressively as it did last season, especially in this track, in this this Bahrain track, which is very aggressive on tyres due to the track surface. So while a disappointing result for Hulkenberg, there certainly is at least some promise from how the performance of the weekend went in general. 15th, Alex Albon. Again, there seems to be more speed in the Williams from last year. They've taken a step forward in one lap pace, it seems, but a lot of teething issues. The car was overheating very early on. You had an issue with the brakes, rear brakes specifically, and you had to keep pushing the brake bias forward to a point where it was nearly 100% front biased. So yeah, he was struggling with a difficult car. But there does seem to be room for improvement there with the Williams. So yeah, again, Albon probably would have benefited from there being a bit more unreliability amongst the grid. He might have gained a position or two, but when 20 cars finish, it's hard for those near the back to try and claim anything. So yeah, not a great day for Williams, with Logan down the back, and then Albon nursing issues throughout the race. But room for improvement from Williams. Then I'm going to have to discuss the two ORB Visa Cash App drivers in one here. Daniel Ricciardo 13th and Yuki Tsunoda 14th. Yuki, to be fair, definitely had the better pace all throughout the weekend over Danny Rick. The only reason Danny Rick finished, well, not the only reason, but the reason Danny Rick finished ahead of Yuki in the race is they were asked to switch positions because Danny Rick was on a different strategy to Yuki. Yuki was on the hard tyre at the end of the race, whereas Danny Rick was on the soft, and they were quite close to Kevin Magnussen in 12th, and Guan Yu Zhou in 11th. Wasn't too far up the road. So Yuki was asked to let Danny Rick through on the softer tyre, for fresher softer tyre, to try and at least have a go at K-Mag, and then maybe possibly get down the road to take Zhou Guan Yu. Now, these are all for non-points paying positions, but with these lower end teams fighting for single digit points come the end of the season, count back positions could become very important. So that's why they do try and finish as high up as they can, even if there's no points on the table. Now, Danny Rick didn't get K-Mag in the end, but Yuki was very, very, very upset about having to make the switch because he wasn't miles off K-Mag himself, but at the same time he wasn't exactly on the cusp of overtaking K-Mag. So he wasn't impressed about being asked to move over for Danny Rick. He was quite vocal on the radio. Danny Rick was vocal about him not making the switch, but he was less aggressive about it. He just wanted it for the greater good to at least have a chance at overtaking Kevin Magnussen. So eventually Yuki did what's the word I'm looking for? I'll put a better word than cave. He did subside to the requests of the engineers on the pit wall, and he let Danny Rick through, but he let him through probably 2-3 laps too late. Danny Rick had used up probably the best performance of the soft tyre, and also he let him through as Max Verstappen was coming up to lap them. So they kind of had to back off to let Max through, which allowed K-Mag to stretch out a bit. So it was all just a little too late. So Yuki probably should have been a bit mature and just, for the greater good of the team, let Danny Rick through when the request was originally made. And you know, Yuki's had a bit of a reputation for being a bit hot-headed and emotional, which he has been working on, but he's still showing signs of being a bit petulant. When push comes to shove, you have to think it's a strange sport, Formula 1. Each driver is driving for themselves, but it is a team sport, and in this kind of scenario you have to think of the team. Then after the checker flag, he dive bombed Danny Rick, locking up into the first corner on the cool down lap now, remember. So this is silly behaviour. And then he very much came up on the inside of Danny Rick then after doing that, very close to clipping him. So with a very, very open driver market going into 2025, and Yuki being one of the people who is out of contract at the end of the year, while he does appear to have the legs on Danny Rick currently, ever so slightly anyway, performance wise, he will have to keep that up throughout the season. But if it's nip and tuck, behaviour like that won't enamour him to team bosses and personnel when it comes to choosing a driver for 2024. So an unfortunate situation with the RBs, but the car does look decently quick, decently at the higher end of the midfield. They didn't perfectly execute the weekend, but and then of this kerfuffle at the end of the race didn't add to what wasn't a perfectly executed weekend from them. Car passing me by here. Qashqai, if you're curious. That's the RBs. Obviously, just in discussing that, Kevin Magnussen 12th. So again, showing a slightly improved Haas for this season. Again, he's been slightly, what's the word I'm looking for, flattered, finishing 12th. By his teammate having trouble at the start. His teammate certainly had the legs on him in qualifying. Hulkenberg was 1.2 seconds faster than Kevin Magnussen in qualifying, with Nico Hulkenberg getting into Q3 and Kevin Magnussen being very much at the tail end of Q2. But the fact that both of them made it to Q2 and then Hulkenberg went to Q3 does show the improvement of the Haas. Pretty innocuous race, but he did the best that he could with the slightly improved Haas F1 car. 12th. He probably would have been Danny Rick probably would have got him had he been allowed to get through by Yuki Tsunoda, but 12th, about as good as K-Mag could have done yesterday. Then just ahead of him was Guan Yu Zhou, finishing 11th, just outside of the points. Again, slight improvement on last year, but that's just about where they are. He executed a pretty decent race, a pretty decent weekend, Guan Yu Zhou, but 11th, again, with everyone finishing, that's about as best as the Sauber team could have hoped for, really. Then into the points paying positions, Lance Stroll managed to get back up to 10th after having that tangle with Nico Hulkenberg at the start, which spun him around and he was at the very back. So a decent recovery drive from Stroll, to be fair. His very experienced teammate, who finished just ahead of him, definitely still is slightly ahead performance-wise, but he's definitely shown a bit of improvement after a very mixed bag season he had last year. So 10th for Stroll and then 9th for Alonso. Alonso probably out-qualified the performance of the car. He qualified 6th, but as the race unfolded, he dropped down to 9th. Again, 9th and 10th. That's basically just where the Aston Martin is at the moment. No particular issues with the cars, other than the incident that Stroll had at the start with Hulkenberg, but no mechanical issues with the car. It doesn't look like a bad car, and there's room for improvement, but again, their performance last year again was somewhat flattered by the fact that others around them didn't have the best start of the season. So they're basically where they were at the end of last year. They're behind those who finished ahead of them, being the McLaren, the Mercedes, the Ferrari and the Red Bulls. That's just where Aston Martin currently lie in the lay of the land of Formula 1, which Alonso has kind of basically said, I'm in, not using these exact words, but he said like he was the person who got the good qualifying results, and then the car let him down. Fernando's being very kind of vocal about the performance of the Aston Martin. I think he's definitely gassing either the team to make serious improvements, or he will either step away from the sport, or he's absolutely selling himself to one of the more front-running cars, which are going to have, well, the two front-running teams, be it Red Bull or Mercedes, who might have drives for next year, which he might be looking at for a last chance for good old Fernando to get something out of what remains of his long and fairly illustrious career, to be fair. So that's the Aston Martin's 8th, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. He's slightly overshadowed by his teammate, but again, it's about, give or take, it's about where the McLaren is. The McLaren and the Mercedes are probably in and around the same performance-wise. Again, nothing... Sorry, excuse me. It's very cold now. I'm starting to sniffle. There's nothing wrong with the McLaren in itself. It's just, it's very even Stevens between them and the Mercedes, really. Because Oscar was 8th, slightly overshadowed by Norris, but only, we're talking tenths of a second here. Hamilton finished 7th in the Mercedes. Again, the Mercedes was slightly had some slightly worrying issues with the engine. They were having some high engine temperatures, and Hamilton was complaining about his brakes, hence why he was slightly further down. But again, his teammate did seem to have the upper hand on him all weekend, so maybe the Ferrari effect is already kicking in for Lewis Hamilton ahead of 2025. But again, it's about where the Mercedes is. The Mercedes and McLaren are like it ended Mercedes McLaren, so they split each other. But yeah, they're both quite evenly matched, and finishing at the back end of the top 3 teams is where they're at. Top 4 teams, I should say. So Hamilton was ahead of him. Then Norris was 6th. Again, he did about as much as he possibly could with the McLaren this weekend. Nothing too dramatic. He ran his own race and finished. He got the maximum out of the car. They probably could have capitalised on the Mercedes factory team having some issues with the cooling of the engine. So maybe he could have pushed a little bit harder to get Russell, who finished 5th. Russell did well, to be fair to him, to get the car to 5th with those issues. He was up as high as 2nd at one point in the race, but the performance started to drop off with those issues. So 5th was as good as George Russell could manage. But again, it's about where the Mercedes is currently after one race. And then we have the top 4. So Charles Leclerc finished 4th, which he's slightly disappointed about, seeing as he qualified 2nd. Not too far off Max in qualifying. Possibly could have even had pole had things gone a little bit smoother. But he was battling a brake issue, especially in the early half of the race. There was something wrong with the front brakes, and it was causing the car to pull to the right. I need no confidence in the brake pedal. It seemed to settle down a bit as the race went on, but he lost a lot of time then in the early half of the race. His teammate had a much better race, less issues, was the quicker of the two in the race because he didn't have the same problems that Charles had. So Sainz finished 3rd, and that's about as good as he and Ferrari could have asked for. Again, you'd have to assume his teammate probably would have finished ahead of him had he not had those issues with his brakes. But there's no denying Sainz ran a good race. He pulled out some good overtakes on George Russell, on his teammate, and he got the maximum out of the Ferrari this weekend. So a decent race from Carlos, and not a promising enough weekend from Ferrari. They're slightly ahead of where they were this stage last year, so the car is definitely improved, and they've plenty to build on. Sainz putting a good addition into his CV, going ahead of 2025, as he is being turfed out of Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton next year. So yeah, he did himself plenty of favours in looking for a drive for next year, and yeah, he got the maximum out of the Ferrari this weekend. So a decent weekend from Carlos Sainz, and he was voted driver of the day, which I think is pretty fair. It's hard to argue that Max didn't get it, considering how dominant he was, but when you barely even saw Max on the TV feed, you can understand why people weren't voting for him, because you kind of forgot he was even in the race. So then we're on to the top two, which a 1-2 finish for the ever impressive, ever dominant Red Bull. So Checo Perez, he finished second. He started fifth, so not a great qualifying from Checo. Although he wasn't a million miles off Max, I think it was 3.5 tenths. I think, showing how one lap pace is quite close currently. Although race pace is clearly in a different league, but yeah, he finished second, so about as good a start as Checo could have asked for after a tumultuous season last year, where he certainly dropped off after a decent start to the season in 2023. But finished second, comfortably ahead of the rest of the field. But at the same time, he was, at the end of the race, 23.5 seconds behind his dominant world champion teammate Max Verstappen. Max, as I said, he took the lead at the start. He came across on Charles just to take the lead into the first corner, and after that it was game over. I think by lap 5 he was 9 seconds ahead, and he just kept building on that. So he essentially had a pit stop in hand from his teammate at the end of the race, and judging by the data analysis after the race, he had plenty of pace in hand. So an ominous victory from the reigning world champion. Again, the next two tracks, although both of them are in the Middle East, they are very different tracks. Jeddah is a street circuit, and Saudi Arabia, Jeddah. And then we have, what's after Jeddah then? Bahrain. Get confused with all the Middle Eastern races we have now. So Saudi Arabia, we've had Qatar. Sorry, Lusail. Lusail's Lusail's a good circuit, not actually where the WC was this weekend, but it's a very different surface. It's a much smoother, less abrasive surface. Saudi Arabia is a street track. So look, we'll try and stay positive. There might be some slightly different performance differentials in the next two races. Although you would be a mentalist to bet on anyone other than Max dominating both those races, but we shall see. Very ominous, but well-deserved victory from Max Verstappen. But as I've ran through, as you can hear, I struggled to think of any dramatic or interesting things to really say in that rundown of the top 20, because it was a very, very dull race. There was some overtaking, but nothing mad. There was no crazy battles. Most of the overtakes were done with DRS, and then so you could argue artificial overtaking. And yeah, it looks like it's going to be, after that first race, it'd be hard to see anything other than a Red Bull dominating season in 2024. So yeah, we shall see. Maybe things will be different next weekend, but it's unlikely. But yeah, that was not an inspiring opening round to the 2024 season. So you have to think F1 and Liberty Media they must be worried. Last season was not spectacular. And stuff like Netflix released the viewing figures for the most recent season of Drive to Survive, and it's down 30% on last year. So you have to think the increased interest that Formula One has garnered over the last couple of years due to Drive to Survive and the pretty spectacular season that was 2021 is very much going to start to wane unless something dramatic happens relatively soon. So I think there's a lot of people who will have invested in Formula One recently, and the current commercial rights holders, Liberty Media, must be a little bit worried as to how dismal the on-track action is currently. The only thing that really brought any excitement to the weekend was the drama in Red Bull and the whole Christian Horner situation, which the internal investigation was resolved during the week, and he's been cleared, although it's still open to an appeal. But then after he was cleared, there was some WhatsApp conversations leaked. The authenticity of these WhatsApp conversations is still up for question. But that's the only kind of drama that F1 is holding on to, because the on-track action is dismal. Post-race, Jos Verstappen was very vocal about how he thinks the whole scenario is destabilising for the Red Bull team, and he thinks Horner should be asked to step aside or sacked or whatever. So you really have to wonder what Jos Verstappen's motivation is in being so vocal about the team principal, who has been, somewhat instrumental in the success of his son, and therefore him, because Jos is living vicariously through his son, having the career that he never had. That's about the only thing that's really keeping any kind of excitement and drama in Formula 1, is the soap opera of stuff that's happening off track with the Red Bull team principal. But I'll finish up talking about Formula 1 there now, because I've been rambling on for half an hour and talked absolute bollocks. I'll finish off with just some slightly more positive motorsport news. Also on Saturday was the opening round of the World Endurance Championship, the 1,812 kilometres of Qatar. I don't really know exactly why they settled on that as the run format, because it basically works out to about 10 hours, 335 laps, and why they don't just call it the 10 hours of Qatar, I don't know. Anyway, it's the first time the World Endurance Championship has competed in Qatar. As I said, it's at the Losail circuit, the same circuit that the Formula 1 will be at, which is a decent circuit, to be fair. It does encourage some good racing. I wasn't glued to it for 10 hours. I just had it on in the background because it was on during the Formula 1, and I didn't sit at my laptop for 10 hours watching an endurance race, but I had it on in the background and did keep an eye on it. And it was, from what I watched, it was a good race. The results, it was an all Porsche podium in the hypercars. The Penske Porsche, number 6 of Kevin Estre, Andre Lotterer and Van Tour, finished first. Second was the Hertz Jota Porsche of Will Stevens, Callum Ilott and Nato, the number 12 Jota Porsche, and then the other Penske Porsche, number 5, finished in third. It was a sad state of affairs for the Peugeot. What number Peugeot was it? Number 63, which was leading at one point, leading for the first several laps of the race, was eventually overtaken by the number 6 Porsche, but then was running second for most of the race, and then a technical issue on the penultimate lap saw them drop down the order. They pulled over after the checker flag, at the time in 7th, but then the car didn't make it to Parc Fermé, which is part of the regulations, so I think it was actually only classified in 13th. So a sad end to the race for the Peugeot, which were looking to have their best result since they came back into endurance racing last year. Then 4th was the Cadillac, the number 2 Cadillac, kind of benefiting from other teams having a bit of a dismal day. The number 5th was the AF Corsa Ferrari, so the privateer Ferrari, number 83, Robert Kubica car. Ran a decent enough race. As you can tell by the order list, it's kind of been a flip reversal of last season's order, with the Peugeot being competitive, the Porsches locking at the podium, when last year it would have been the other way around. So the top Toyota that finished was the number 7 car, Mike Conway, Kobayashi and F1 throwaway Nick de Vries. They finished 6th, which was the World Championship winning car last year. And then the top Ferrari was the number 50 Ferrari, and 7th the factory Ferrari, because the AF Corsa that finished 5th is a privateer car, as I was saying. And then the sister Ferrari, the number 51, finished 13th. So the Peugeot actually finished 14th, now I think of it. So a flip reversal. The Ferrari and the Toyota were 1 and 2 in the Endurance Championship last year, and now they're at the back end, disregarding the Lamborghini and BMW, who are only making their debut this season in the hypercar class. And the Porsches and the Peugeots and the Cadillacs are at the top end of the grid. So I don't know if it's got something to do with balance of performance, but there has been an unusual changing of the guard. It was actually the last race for the current Peugeot. There'll be an upgraded car for the next round. Interesting result. An all Porsche podium, a quick Peugeot, and Le Mans winning Ferrari, finishing much further down the grid. Now the Ferraris did have a messy race, with clashes and some reliability issues, but even pace wise they weren't there really. We'll see how it continues on throughout the season. The highest finishing Alpine was 8th, the number 35 car, so not the Mick Schumacher car, so whoever else is in that. And then the BMW, the highest finishing BMW was in 11th. And then the GT3 class, Porsche took the top spot in that as well, with Manthey Racing in the 911. Second was Heart of Racing, which is an American outfit, in an Aston Martin Vantage, and then another Aston Martin on the podium in GT3 with the station car. And a special mention for 4th place for the BMW WRT team of Valentino Rossi, in his debut in the World Endurance Championship, finishing 4th, which is a pretty impressive outing for the former MotoGP great legend that is Valentino Rossi. So I'm going to wrap up now, because I've been talking shite now for 36 minutes of pure motorsport. So if you have listened to this one, you're obviously a motorsport enthusiast like myself. I said I'll keep motorsport episodes separate to regular car ones, because I know not everyone cares about motorsport, and also as you can tell, I can drivel on about motorsport for so long that if I mix the two of them together, you'd be listening to absolute bollocks from me for way too long, if you listen at all. But if you do listen, as ever, I do love you. Be safe, be well, and I'll probably be back soon enough with a car one, possibly tomorrow if I have time. And until then, I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.